Welcome to the NSU's Beverage Festival, a week-long series of events celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Beverage Report, providing a new global vision on the welfare state.
The shift in the global macroeconomy over the last few decades has resulted in a number of new social risks. Industrial production has moved from rich countries to emerging economies, therefore contributing to structural insecurity in jobs and income.
While growth is increasingly captured by capital, continuity of income from work becomes an illusion. This creates new inequalities between the old and the young, the educated and the unskilled, and the wealthy and the poor. We are forced to reassess the future of work and the whole structure of our economy.
The 75th anniversary of the Beverage Report provides the opportunity to tackle these issues. Let's take a closer look at the 5 classical giants and at the new social risks they bring.
Want, the persistent risk of poverty, even when employed. Idleness, the restructure of employment and skills. Squalor, the absence of affordable housing and social spaces. Disease, an ever-aging growing population. And ignorance, the obsolescence of skills in a new digital world.
We think that welfare state regimes need innovative policies to handle these new social risks.
All students that had signed up for the course, 47 of them, to the political economy of European welfare states, were enlisted and divided up in groups to come up per group with 2 policy innovations that were done somewhere in a European welfare state or seriously discussed.
And so in this video, we will present 5 policy ideas for each of Beverage's giants. Universal basic income, long-term care contributions, workers' accounts, digital literacy, cooperative housing.
Well, I think if anybody has a fresh mind and fresh ideas, it should be young people who are interested in social policy and welfare states, because they can think of how all these incremental reforms are part of a comprehensive policy of social innovation. That's how Beveridge himself characterized his endeavor.
Wasn't charged. And this was missing. So we got something.
A universal basic income is primarily addressed at fighting the want giant, but also has positive externalities on the other 4 diseases. A UBI would not simply tackle poverty related to unemployment, but also working poverty and, more in general, any form of insufficient or discontinuous income.
Out of the many proposed designs, our funding will be based on 3 pillars. The first and main part of our funding will be based on dividends coming from sovereign funds. Such sovereign funds already exist in places like Norway and Alaska and could be set up in other countries using taxation on capital gains and on inheritance. Secondly, we would utilize the funds already available in welfare programs set under the UBI level. And third, we would use a small progressive tax on income to reclaim UBI from the richest of us who don't need it.
In the last 20 years, pilots have been going on in several developing countries, such as India, Namibia, Uganda, and Kenya, and have now moved to Western countries, such as in the Netherlands and in Canada. We are here, we're visiting Senior Fellow at the LSE, Dr. Tairai. She's currently researching on UBI. How did recipients spend their money?
Mainly on improving living conditions, from investing in health, in food and better nutrition, in education, in housing. They were able to reduce debt and start to save more. They were able to make better employment choices against exploitation. Women's independence and decision-making grew, and domestic violence reduced. So people did not squander the money. People did not stop working. They worked the same or more.
The IMF went as far as suggesting that India should implement UBI. Is this applicable also to developed European welfare states?
If the IMF considers that India can afford a UBI, so can any developed country. The level it should be at, RSA proposed a level of £10,000 per year in the UK. The euro dividend is another interesting proposal, set at 10% of EU's GDP. modest initial UBI with gradual increases and a gradual rollout is feasible with existing EU welfare states. The welfare state, as we know, has reached its limits into what it can possibly achieve. And patching it even more is not going to help us in reducing inequalities, in eradicating poverty, in increasing and enabling meaningful participation into society.
What would Beveridge think of a universal basic income?
Beveridge would probably remind us that his proposal was considered very ambitious and very few thought it could ever happen, and yet this is a system we have today. So to quote Beveridge, I would say it's not time for patching, but for revolutions in thinking.
The personal work account aims to tackle two comprehensive challenges in context of the future of work: structural unemployment and an unsustainable economy. Firstly, it addresses the issue of dualization because it prevents the emergence of new market outsiders. Secondly, it boosts the investment into the green economy, promoting a more sustainable society.
The personal work account is a simple idea. Each citizen will be provided with a starting capital when entering the labour market, take for instance £20,000. This capital will be used in a work-related investment, such as for instance retraining or the creation of a firm. The idea behind this project will be to provide individuals the opportunity to adapt to the fast-changing labour market of our century.
Yes, and at the same time, the workers' account should also boost the green economy. There will be special incentives, say an account top-up, for those who invest in green skills, for example, engineering skills to build solar panels. Therefore, the workers' account will not only help people manage changing labour markets, but also encourage people to invest in those skills that we need to keep our economy sustainable.
In order to discuss our policy idea of personal work accounts, we interviewed two experts in the area of social policy. First, Thomas Biegert, fellow at the LSE Social Policy Department, and Julien Legrand, who's professor of social policy here at LSE as well. Thomas talks more about the general pros and cons of the policy proposal.
And so the problem might be that the money only goes to people into the labour market, and granted, if you look at labour market developments, that's more and more a larger proportion of society nowadays, but still there will always be some people, some individuals who either cannot or do not want to enter the labour market.
Well, Julien is referring it to the policy of Child Trust Fund, which was introduced here in the UK in the 2000s.
And every child in the UK had this amount, had an account opened for them, £250, £500 for people in special circumstances. As the scheme progressed, more was put in for children who were in social care or children with special needs, and it was basically a brilliant idea. So in the end, we decided we would not restrict it, and I think that was also true of the baby bond idea, that they decided they wouldn't actually restrict its use. So, and I still think that's the right idea. And I think that if any system you come up with, you should not restrict it.
Okay, now we heard some pros and cons of our policy ideas, the personal work account. On the one hand, it can be beneficial to develop financial literacy for young people. On the other hand, there's the question whether giving money to people might be actually tackling the challenge of dualization in our society.
The name of our policy is Cooperative Housing. Its main aim is to address the 21st century version of what Beveridge called squalor. This policy is not only meant to tackle poor housing conditions, but also to address the housing problem with a long-term approach. Beveridge imagined a mixed community in which the doctor, the grocer, the butcher, and the farm laborer all lived in the same city. Unfortunately, that is not the reality of today. This policy idea tries to take advantage of unused existing buildings in the city and transform them into cooperative housing communities. A cooperative housing community is a place where vulnerable people, such as refugees or low-income people, all live together with individuals with different socioeconomic status. This can be done by using public properties, as we will show in the example later. Private investment is attracted by mixing housing with commercial activities.
We're here at the Grand Voisin, the cooperative housing community, and we're going to ask some questions to one of the managers of the associations working here.
C'est qu'on est dans une expérimentation. Ça veut dire que là, on essaie. On fait des erreurs, on tente, on essaie, on profite d'une réglementation souple, de bienveillance aussi des pouvoirs publics. Donc en fait, les politiques d'aménagement, en tout cas des aménagements urbains, prennent un temps fou, alors que dans des temporalités plus courtes, d'autres acteurs peuvent s'y inscrire, notamment les centres d'hébergement d'urgence. On est passé d'une occupation temporaire à un urbanisme transitoire. On va revendiquer un processus empirique et incrémental, c'est-à-dire que rien n'a été vraiment planifié. Et c'est même quand on parle d'urbanisme, etc., c'est hyper intéressant parce que pendant de très nombreuses années, l'urbanisme a été planificateur. Alors que là, la logique est différente, c'est qu'on va se reposer sur les usages. C'est-à-dire qu'on va laisser un espace de liberté, les gens vont vivre par eux-mêmes, vont créer des activités et vont combler en fait des besoins qui étaient manquants sur le site. L'argument qui a permis de faire évoluer la mentalité, c'est qu'ils y voient une valeur économique. Et en fait, avec une baisse des subventions est venue l'idée aussi, en parallèle, de trouver des activités plus rémunératrices pour financer en fait la partie sociale. À titre de comparaison, dans le 14e arrondissement, c'est à peu près 24 € le mètre carré dans le marché immobilier classique, alors qu'ici on a plutôt à 17 € le mètre carré. Donc en fait, cette différence permet à plein de structures d'émerger, d'exister. Évidemment, maintenant, le projet immobilier qui va venir ici, il a une valeur énorme parce qu'on a parlé de préfigurer les usages. Juste à côté, vous avez la conciergerie solidaire. Et en fait, la conciergerie solidaire, c'est un dispositif qui permet de mettre en lien justement les hébergés avec des besoins sur le site. Il faut qu'on soit capable de dire effectivement, avant ce quartier-là, il était mort. Et si on n'était pas là, on avait laissé ça pendant 10 ans, ça aurait été même une logique inverse, ça aurait créé plus de sentiments d'insécurité parce que c'est vide, parce qu'être au Grand Voisin, c'est une chance, c'est pas un droit.
The future funding of long-term social care is becoming increasingly critical. The so-called long-term care contribution was a policy suggested in the Tories manifesto and set out plans for pensioners to contribute more to their social care. It suggested that those who receive home care would have to pay towards it, and the value of their house would be added to their assets. On the one hand, the policy would lead to that more people qualify for state support, as they only have to pay if they have assets that is over £100,000. On the other hand, those who today receive state-funded home care and have assets over 100,000, such as their home, would be asked to pay more for their care to the full value of their house. For many people, real estate make up a large part of their wealth, and was one reason why the proposal was so controversial. However, the financing of long-term care needs to be tackled, and this may be one policy solution that could solve it.
Debbie says that some sort of change on wealth is needed if the public service are to be sustained without an undue burden on the working age generation. The argument is that there should be an insurance against very high costs and that the state should provide it. The question is, how high such a cap should be? Set it low, and the state will have to meet the bulk of long-term care costs, which is already failing to do so, and so the policy problem will not be solved. Set it high, and more people will find their wealth not protected. However, not only will the number of prospective beneficiaries of the cap fall, but also the beneficiary group has an undesirable feature. It consists of the wealthy people. The higher the cap, the more it will be that only the wealthiest benefit from it.
The solution to the problem, says Deborah, is not to design the whole system of long-term care finance around the protection of housing wealth, but to add an insurance scheme for those who want to protect their equity in their homes. Such an insurance scheme is not difficult to devise, and it could have the useful feature that since the insurance is of housing equity rather than care itself, those with more valuable houses to protect should pay higher premium. As we can see, there are good arguments for turning to housing wealth to provide for funding for care. The attraction of this proposal is that it's progressive and therefore targets not only financing of long-term care, but also wealth inequality.
The name of our policy is Basic Digital Education, and its main aim is to tackle the 21st century spin on ignorance by acknowledging the changing way in which skills are required and the future of work.
It also addresses the inequalities that may arise from different levels of ability in accessing and proficiently using the content available online. Beveridge believed that ignorance is an evil weed which dictators may cultivate among their dupes, but which no democracy can afford among its citizens. With the majority of information nowadays being received through online media, which has an important role in organizing, shaping, and disseminating knowledge.
Beginning digital education as early as possible is the most effective way to ensure that no child leaves school without the ability to develop these skills and actively participate in these new markets. It would also act as a kind of insurance scheme against the digitisation of jobs and the impact that artificial intelligence will have on our future.
The School 4.0, its Getting Digital strategy in Austria, aims to ensure that every child is equipped to deal with digital content and acquire digital skills. It is based on 4 interlinking pillars: digital basic education, digitally competent teachers, infrastructure and IT equipment, and digital learning tools.
So we were very lucky to get to go speak to Norbert Pachler. His views and insight was invaluable.
We should be a little bit hesitant in relation to digital basic education. Reducing it to basic elementals, if you like, is going to be very, very challenging and difficult. And at any rate, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a coherent, set of literacy practices, or is it a much more diverse set of multiple literacies? So they enable us to enhance authenticity of resources and of context that we use. They enable a much greater degree of contextualization and situatedness of resources, of interaction, of tasks, of setting. And there is also, I think, the importance of recognizing what these digital devices are particularly designed for and good at, and in particular things like conversation. So it's important then for you to have a understanding of learning as a conversational practice. Is in relation to the focus of the Austrian proposal here on digital basic education. I think we ought to look very carefully at what this looks like in order to make those practices that are actually happening in school meaningful in later life.
These proposals, we put forward some suggestions to design a stronger welfare state for the 21st century. Our world and economy are not only changing unrecognizably, but also at an unprecedented pace. Technology is transforming what we do and how we do it. We need a more ambitious welfare state that is equipped with the adequate means to respond to an increasingly challenging environment. Despite identifying new challenges throughout this video, we found that Beveridge's 5 giants still held true, timeless, if you will.
These proposals update Beveridge's original 5 giants by considering each one of them in the context of an increasingly unequal society. This builds on Beveridge's first guiding principle, to make the use of the full experience gathering in class, whilst not being restricted by consideration of sectional interests in the obtaining of that experience. We see a society that is changing from the foundations up, but ultimately we still have the same needs that Beveridge identified.
We now leave the floor to our distinguished panel, hoping that their expertise will help us clearing some key doubts. Are our proposals feasible, both technically and politically? Do they address the new risks adequately, or do they ignore some key issues? How would or should a 2018 Beveridge report be different?